All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Season 2 of the Rule 34 podcast. Double header for today, as we had the episode in the morning with Dom, and tonight, later in the afternoon, we have today's episode with usually your host Jack, joined by my fellow guest.
It's Mr. Solis.
Yeah. So, how have you been, sir? I believe the last pay-per-view we covered was Extreme Rules, and as always, just like between the time of SummerSlam and Extreme Rules, we saw that very much has happened, at least like in the rest of the wrestling world, from the time period of Extreme Rules till now.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jack, because even though I didn't watch the show we're going to discuss, I did watch AEW Dynamite on Saturday, and I did watch Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega from September on demand. I caught up with that. And so, yeah, I am watching wrestling. It's just not this stuff.
Yeah, and I feel you. I feel similar in the sense that, it's almost in a sense there's not as much intrigue from month to month, but like, I think the consistent base has been that, like, I think especially since like we started covering these, that for the most part, at least in like my opinion, that even though like there isn't much intrigue or like hype going into a lot of these events, at least for me personally, it's like at least like the main consistency that I have with it is that they at least throw on good shows, good matches throughout it, even if it doesn't have my total investment in it.
And I think I've made this comparison before, but there are shows like Impact and indie shows that like only run monthly shows, that get away with it, because they're not promising so much. WWE just promises so much. It's like the difference between getting one good Batman movie for the first time in 10 years versus these like Marvel movies. Did you hear about the new reviews for the Eternals?
I have not.
I got a glimpse of one on Rotten Tomatoes that like said it was about a 7 out of 10. You're like, ugh, goodness, that's about as well as I could have hoped for the Eternals.
Yeah, and I mainly bring up the intrigue thing because I think we can both acknowledge that a really like big issue in the WWE right now is like the constant rematches. And like it works in some senses, like Edge versus Rollins, there's for the most part been consistent progression in their story that causes them to have rematches, but their rematches are saved for big events. Essentially, they had their match at SummerSlam, then the big match at Madison Square Garden, and then here at Crown Jewel, with again showcasing that they know what they're doing, when the fact that they bring out the Hell in a Cell as the feud ender, and you kind of look at that and go, well, then why don't you do that for more feuds? Why was it that for years Hell in a Cell came in just because it was October?
You know who the difference maker in this one is?
I have a feeling more than likely Edge.
I'm sure it's Edge, who's an old school guy who knows how it should be done and has the to go, nope, I ain't doing anything unless it makes sense.
Yeah, and and like I guess that's like a really big issue, like especially for intrigue, because it's like, if the one thing a lot of us fans are invested in is like the match itself, it doesn't help that a lot of these matches are given away on TV, constantly, and like obviously they don't get the amount of time that they do on pay-per-view, but we get like constant rematches that like are like 5 minutes on the weekly shows, and even for someone who like hasn't watched the weekly shows in years, it's like still seeing it happen, like like in recap, seeing that it happens week after week, you're kind of like, well, then if it's happening week after week, well, what's so special about it finally happening on the pay-per-view?
Oh my, shots fired.
But I don't want to spit too much negativity, but like it's definitely like a point of interest, that there's a big struggle for intrigue versus, all these other companies who have been like really spiking my intrigue. You know, like.
But I'll tell you what, I am not at a loss for content, or I'm not at a loss for quality entertainment, because on Friday I attended Josh Barnett's Bloodsport 7.
Yeah, I saw that, and you know that's always been one of the ones that interested me. I know they held one earlier, I believe, during like I forgot if it was May or April of this year as well, right?
Yeah, did they actually hold it? I know one like got canceled because of pandemic.
Yeah, I believe,
I think you're right. I think it was Barnett versus Moxley as like the headliner.
Yeah.
So in this one that I saw, it was Barnett, Josh Barnett, former UFC heavyweight champion, versus Arturo Ruas. Remember him?
Yeah.
And like, it's so funny. You get the sense that Josh Barnett, I think he thinks of himself as a indie Brock Lesnar, and I go, I mean, I guess that's true, but I don't know if it's good.
Yeah, but
my friend came with me, and he was like, not at all surprised that, spoiler alert, Barnett beat Ruas.
Yeah,
it's like he's not going to lose in a show that's named after him. But it was great to see Marina Shafir. It was great to see Suzuki as many times as I have. I'm so excited about this tour that he's been on the last couple of months.
And good thing you bring it up. As much as people wanted it to be on the main show, I was happy it was on a YouTube buy-in because it meant no commercials for it. Bryan Danielson versus Minoru Suzuki, AEW threw that in, I think it was last week when they were going to be going head-to-head with SmackDown.
I watched that one, Jack, and it got me thinking. I'm like, hey, you know what I should do? I should really carve out my top 10 wrestling matches for 2021.
Yeah, that match had me feeling the same exact way watching it, and it's funny because like the moment I saw it announced, and I was like, okay, I have to watch that. Like, this has been a match talked about ever since Bryan Danielson became a free agent and stuff. And then the moment I saw they said it was going to be on YouTube, they had me hooked because I was like, hey, even if I can't catch it live, I can catch it later on. And the best part, like I said, commercial free. It was like, you know, I think I mentioned it on the last episode or like previous one. I was mentioning how, you know, when it comes to the top 10 list, I don't think I'm going to be having too many like TV matches on there because of the fact that commercial interruptions and, you know, picture-in-picture kind of, you know, break your immersion into it, you know. But
yeah, that's what got me about the Danielson Omega match from September. I mean, one, I was immediately ruined for it because I knew it was going to go to a no contest because of all the news that broke about it the night after or the day after, right? Mm-hmm. So like, I know it's going to go time limit draw, and I try to like not let that bother me. But what did bother me was the commercial break, the picture-in-picture, and that 2/3 of that match. You know, it's a lot of strikes, and Danielson, bless his heart, he likes to kick. And, like, he's got those, like, pillows on his boots, you know what I mean? Things get picked up about 2/3 in. That's when he starts doing, you know, suplexes off the top rope. But I go, I mean, I guess people were just excited at the novelty of it all. Or maybe he had to see it live with fresh eyes, but I like Suzuki versus Bryan better.
Yeah, and, you know, obviously, we're going to get into Crown Jewel soon, but I have just so much to talk about, like, outside. And the biggest one, AEW's anniversary show, the casino ladder match with the Joker in it.
I heard, I didn't see it, but I heard some cowboy stuff happened.
Yep, I was watching that live. As I keep mentioning, you know, when it comes to Dynamite, I don't watch it like weekly either. It's just like whenever they throw on a match that I know for sure is catching my interest, they're gonna get me. And I think on that show, I forget what else they ran, but there was like a couple matches that had my intrigue. But the moment I saw the Joker for ladder match, I was like, no, I have to tune in because, you know, this could be almost anyone. And then the moment Hangman walks out, I was like, here we go. Full Gear's right around the corner. Are we doing it or not? And then for him to win, I was just so invested in all of it. And I ended up tuning in the next week, even though Dynamite was on Saturday, because I was like, no, I know he's going to show up and cut a promo, maybe have some type of interaction with Omega to start. So I was like, I can't miss any point of this build.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. And how excited am I for you and for this moment that we get inch closer and closer to.
Yeah, so and then I don't know how much you've been keeping up, but did you hear about the semi-tragic news of the G1?
I have missed it, but I have heard it. Well, there was like a bittersweet ending to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Bitter because tell us what happened.
So the finals came down to Kota Ibushi and Okada. I believe this is Ibushi's fourth final, right?
I'm not sure. But Jack, I mean, given all the other people in that tournament, these guys, they play it safe and they go with Ibushi versus Okada.
Yeah. It was kind of like their safe pick, and I guess you could say it almost like blew up in their face because despite it being the safest pick, Ibushi goes for I believe he went for a Phoenix Splash, and he just lands completely wrong. And I still to this day don't know if it was a shoulder issue or a wrist issue, but something dislocated, so they ended up having to stop the match early, and kind of a disappointing end to a G1. Okada just wins by ref stoppage because, Ibushi can't continue the match after that.
Yeah. And then I said bittersweet because tell us about the big old return.
Yeah, so usually after the G1, the winners carry around a briefcase, that says IWGP Heavyweight, championship, I think, basically showing that, hey, since they won, they get to challenge for the title. Well, Okada says, screw your briefcase, and he comes out with the old IWGP Heavyweight Championship. And as much as I'm enjoying Shingo as champion, as you can tell by the shirt I'm wearing.
Hey, nice shirts.
As much as I enjoy him as champ, if it means Okada winning, if it means Okada winning means we get that old belt back, then I'd be down for it. Or I'd be down for Shingo winning and taking that belt instead of the current one.
That's not the good news I was talking about, Jack, but it is nice to see that belt resurrected again. No, Zack Saber Jr., correct me if I'm wrong, did he fight what's his name?
Oh, yes, I totally forgot about that, yes. It was a short exhibition because they're testing the waters with him, but right. Shibata and Zack Saber Jr. had that little exhibition because it looks like, hopefully, again, it's the same situation as when Edge came back, when Daniel Bryan originally came back.
He's the Japanese Daniel Bryan. He thought, I'm done for good and I'll never be able to fight again. And wait a minute, maybe, what if I could fight again?
Yeah.
And goodness gracious, I haven't seen that, but I heard it was something special.
Yeah. There's a part of
Zack Saber Jr. was going to do really well in that tournament. He was doing so well at the beginning.
Yeah, him and surprisingly Jeff Cobb was also doing really well. I'm pretty sure he was almost undefeated throughout it until he finally lost to Okada in the semifinals. But yeah,
it is what it is.
Shibata's back, and similar to how I felt when Edge first returned at the Rumble, Daniel Bryan first returned. Really hoping that I obviously trust the medical staffs, but I really hope that with him coming back, it's like a 100% sure thing, and it's not like, hey, we're going to let you wrestle, but you got to be careful. I mean, obviously, he still should be careful. To be honest, I don't want to see him out here throwing headbutts.
Too, just like Daniel Bryan, when Shibata does come back, I bet they, play it up, and they're like, oof. Let's target the neck. Everybody he fights targets the neck.
Yeah, as much as it was his style, especially in his classic matches with Ishii, I really don't want to see Shibata throwing out any more headbutts right now. If he's gonna be back, it better be for a good while, and him toning down that previous style he had. But Yeah, very excited to see him back as well.
Please and thank you.
But so as you can see, 15 minutes into this episode, you can see what I meant by, the lack of intrigue with WWE versus outside companies. And that's not to say we don't enjoy a lot of what WWE does. It's just at the current moment, there isn't as much intrigue because everything still kind of feels like filler in a sense.
Well, let's try, Jack. Let's try to look at this with fresh eyes. Starting with the kickoff show, we've got the Usos versus the Hurt Business. Now, I don't think that match was played to death on Raw. Was it?
I don't think so at all. I don't think... To be honest, I think this might be the first time we've seen these two teams interact, mainly because, the Hurt Business was always on Raw and they got disbanded before there was any chance of a match like this. But, yeah, and, the interesting part about here is, the Usos are still on SmackDown, the Hurt Business is on Raw. So we more than likely won't see them continue to interact.
Right.
And I get the reason for them staying on Raw because post-draft, it's very clear that on both sides there's a lack of something, and on Raw's side it was like there's really kind of a lack of tag teams, so it made sense to keep the Hurt Business here. But to me, it almost seemed like they were getting built up to go to SmackDown just to feud with the Bloodline. But I guess this was just their little way of like hinting that like maybe somewhere down the line, like in a year or so, they get sent over to SmackDown, and if the Bloodline's still there, maybe they go full on for a feud. But still, again, correcting me on my previous, or for the most part, correcting me. They give us a fresh matchup here. I don't necessarily think it was. I don't think it was for the titles, but it was just a tag match and pretty decent one as well.
Yep.
And nothing more than that. Just a good tag match. I enjoyed it.
And I suppose the Usos won, correct?
Yeah, the Usos win, and Usos should be happy. They have a ton of challengers on SmackDown now post-draft. Like, if I can name it off the top of my head, I believe the tag teams they now have over there are... I know they have Garza and Carrillo now as a team, and they're over there. They got sent over there. I think the Viking Raiders...
Yeah, because I saw Eric holding off Brock Lesnar on SmackDown.
Yeah,
so he's there.
Yeah, they got sent over there. Hit Row's now on Dolph SmackDown.
Ziggler. Hit Row, yes. Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode.
I believe they're on Raw now. The New Day's there. That's correct. The New Day is also there. So yeah, they definitely have a lot more people they can challenge for in the tag side,
Yeah.
So they're definitely like more happy with like who they got over there in terms of like tag teams. They got a lot of challengers.
But a hot opener, you can't get a hotter opener than that, can you, Jack?
Oh well, yeah. The opening match for this show, like the true opening match. Edge versus Seth Rollins in Hell in a Cell, and as I mentioned, it's one of their showcases that they knew how to continually build a long-term story with these two, and have progression each time to the point where this Hell in a Cell felt like it was needed. And overall, I thought it was a really good Hell in a Cell match. I really enjoyed it. It was probably one of the matches of the night for me. I don't know if I put it over their SummerSlam match. I may have to give it a rewatch to determine that, but it was definitely a good match. Maybe in like if I expand my list to like 15 or 20, it might make that list, but I don't think it cracks top 10 for me because I think for sure their SummerSlam match is more than likely going to end up on that top 10. Spoilers for an episode months later down the line.
I mean, anything can happen in a month. That match even can be knocked down a few pegs.
Yeah, but I don't think this one necessarily tops it, but it does not take away from the fact that it was still a really good, not only Hell in a Cell match, but it's still a good match between the two of them.
What spot stands out to you, or that you still kind of recall really vividly?
There was, I think, like Edge. Oof, man, I'm trying to remember. Oh, Rollins tried to hit a suicide dive and just went straight into the cell wall.
Whoa.
Yeah, Edge moved out the way, and then there was a spot where Rollins brings out this chain and wraps it around his foot as to hit the stomp on Edge with it. And I'm trying to remember, he might have got it, but I'm pretty sure he didn't. And if he did, Edge kicked out, because I know there was like 2 spots where like Edge kicked out like at like the very last second to shock people. And I think the best spot, like, to finish off this story for now, was Edge used the stomp in order to win.
Yeah, and isn't it nice to have a definitive finish to a Hell in a Cell match?
Yeah, you already know Rollins is happy to finally have a definitive finish to his Hell in a Cell matches.
Yeah, I wonder how Rollins sort of ranks this Hell in a Cell compared to others that he's been a part of.
Yeah,
it has to outrank the others.
Yeah, I think the only one wait, never mind. I keep. It's funny to think that anytime Rollins has had a Hell in a Cell match, there's been like some type of weird finish, and now that I'm thinking about it, for some reason they both involved Bray Wyatt.
He had one with Dean Ambrose that was like contrived.
Yeah, and then like the finish has that like glowing lamp and like the hologram, and then Bray Wyatt comes out, and then coincidentally, years later, he has the Hell in a Cell match with Wyatt that has that ref stoppage in it.
Goodness gracious!
And the one thing I'll also highlight real quickly is the crowd was really into it. Like, honestly, throughout the night, the Saudi crowd was honestly more into it than I've seen even American crowds at some points, or at least WWE main crowds.
Yeah.
Like, they were really on it with like chants and cheering and booing. Like, they were actually booing heels and cheering faces, which is, as we know, something that the American fans are pretty pretentious about.
Yeah, they are. Pretentious is an incredible word to use.
I think the only person in America in terms of wrestling who truly boos the heels and their actions is my pops.
I'll second that.
But then after that, we move into technically. It's really hard for me to describe this, but like, it's technically again another match that was built with story, but also it didn't have like the amount of time that like say an Edge Rollins did. But okay. They still gave Mansoor and Mustafa Ali a bit of time to build this match. But
yeah, and like you said, and build up to the match. These guys have been sort of that odd couple tag team, trying to make it work to Mustafa Ali's chagrin, and he's just about had it with Mansoor and his. What's Ali's beef with Mansoor?
I mean, I think the main thing was that like Mansoor wasn't being as aggressive when it came to like their tag team, but like I don't know, it almost seemed like they were just doing this match to like reform them as a tag team. Like, the main idea in people's eyes was Mansoor was gonna like finally show his aggressive side and like prove to Ali he could be aggressive, and that was gonna lead to their reformation. But spoiler, obviously that doesn't happen as they have this match. Pretty good, obviously Mansoor's a fan favorite out in Saudi. Of course, being from there.
I believe he's undefeated as well.
Yeah, if I remember, I'm trying to remember some of the people. I know for sure. I know he had a match with Cesaro.
Right.
But he's always been like a decent performer. Obviously over there, very over with the fans over there. And him and Ali have a pretty decent match. They build a lot of momentum. Ali really does how would you say, amp up his heel work here and really gets the crowd into it. And Mansoor gets the win over Ali, and like I said, obviously plans were different for them as Ali attacks Mansoor still, so no signs of a reformation, and then it was a cool moment, but I felt like they could have performed this better because it was like the way they did it was really awkward. But Ali beats up Mansoor, and then
right,
like I don't mean this in a mean way, but generic music, for generic superstar 25 starts playing. Like it's very generic music. There's nothing on the Titantron.
right.
And the announcers aren't helping because they're like, "What is this? Who is this? What is going on?" And you see this man come out dressed in typical, I want to say, I guess, Saudi Arabian attire. And he has his face covered, only see his eyes. And, he's very slowly walking down to the ring, almost as slow as The Undertaker used to be. And so, like, it's kind of awkward because, like, everyone's just kind of like, who is this? And he's not walking fast enough for, like, the anticipation to build and finally finish.
Right.
But so he finally reaches the ring, takes it off, and it turns out to be a silver medalist from the Olympics. I hope I don't butcher this. Tariq Hamdi. Basically, he was a silver medalist in the Olympics from karate, and he takes down Ali and celebrates with Mansoor. Another hometown hero in a sense with Mansoor. Gets a nice pop from the fans, but like I said, I wish they could have done it better, like at least more quickly, because
like, what kind of reaction did he get from the crowd? You said that the crowd were like really on and really cheering and booing in all the right places. How did they respond to this?
They actually cheered because they were more than likely watching the Olympics, and they probably more than likely much like or I don't know how much the U.S. has knowledge of their own Olympics,
right? Let alone other countries' Olympians.
Yeah,
but I hear you, Jack. I hear you saying that the live crowd got a big reaction, but as far as you and me watching this from home, really left in the dark about who this fella was and why he was significant. They could have why do you have to come out with the surprise? Why do you have to come out hidden?
Yeah.
And why didn't they interview him earlier? Like, hey, this is Tarek Hamendi, a silver medalist. How are you? And isn't it exciting to be a crown jewel? Just set it up.
Yeah, and, at least, in my opinion, pick up the pace on things. Because, if you were to watch it back, it was, really, is he going to get down here anytime soon? And you almost, in a sense, felt like the commentators felt the same way. Because, the entire time they're trying to, figure out how to commentate this. And they were like, who's this walking down to the ring? But cool moment, WWE always bringing in,
this is, that's a pretty exciting, that's some pretty exciting storytelling. And I'll tell you what, for all the time that Mansoor and Mustafa Ali would have maybe been deprived having a shorter match, to have that moment with that Olympian, that's the stuff that this, wrestling business is all about.
Yeah.
It's not the match. It's the interaction with Jake Paul, right? It's not the match. It's all the brouhaha after Mustafa Ali getting his comeuppance. You said that commentary was trying to make up for how slow that guy was. I'm going to have a hot take here, Jack. If you go back and watch some of those Raws where Stone Cold is marching to the ring and JR is commentating, I think JR isn't as good as people say he is sometimes. Because if you honestly hear him commentating over Stone Cold marching to the ring, you can hear how ad-lib and how awkward it actually is. If you're super excited, you don't notice, but he's walking down to the ring. He's taking one step at a time. He's checking his watch. You know what I mean? And he goes, and now he's entering the ring. And now he's in the ring. And you go, this is supposedly the greatest commentator of our generation.
Yeah. And let's not even bring up JR's current moments at times.
At least he did Stone Cold saying, oh!
Yeah, but, really good match. from the two of them. Really good spotlight for two young talents, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next match, the Raw Tag Team Championships are on the line between RK Bro and AJ Styles and Omos again. I say again because, you know, saw it at SummerSlam. I don't think we've seen it as much as we have on Raw. I think they've mainly gone the route of just having one person from each team face each other to build this up, and then rely on promos as well.
Yeah, like, and I think the end goal is they're really protecting Omos. Like, he is the attraction. You got to tune into Crown Jewel to see that guy in action. Otherwise, AJ's doing a lot of the weekly work, I think.
Yeah, and, you know, there was rumors around the draft that they wanted to split the two, but, you know, there was a lot of, like, vocal concerns, or concerns, you know, that were brought up, you know, saying that they didn't necessarily think Omos was ready to be a solo guy. So, you know, continue. Yeah, so you just got to hope that continue to work with a guy like Styles will help. Although, you know, obviously, like, an on-screen pairing helps out Omos, but I do hope, like, behind the scenes there's, like, some bigger guys working with Omos, you know, or Omos, to help him out, like, get more comfortable in the ring with his big man style.
Yeah.
And, you know, still a decent match, as you mentioned, you know, still playing up, you know, Omos and his strength and, you know, really protecting him as this giant figure, you know. And for the most part, you know, it's like almost anytime he tags Styles in, that's where a majority of the opposing team gets their offense in. Comparison to when he's in the ring. But, you know, they have good back and forth moments, you know. I guess it's because we're so used to how quickly WWE is to break up teams that I'm surprised by how long both these teams have lasted.
Yeah, there was even a, like, straight up betrayal on the part of RK Bro, but they worked through it. Matt Riddle's like, I forgive you. And you're like, what?
Yeah, so I'm very surprised they made it this far, especially because really Arcade Bro just seemed like, you know, they would win the titles to get that pop, and then, like, at the next pay-per-view they drop them and Orton turns on Riddle, you know, as he usually does with his tag partners. But they seem to be taking this pretty far. I mean, Survivor Series is around the corner. I wouldn't be surprised if they had them drop the titles before Survivor Series.
Nope, I bet they're going to be participants of Team Raw.
Yeah, that's
I bet it lasts past the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't think it goes anywhere past, like, Survivor Series in a sense. Like
let's go. It's been recorded. You said it's not going to make it past Survivor Series. I think they're going into 2022 as RK Bro. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I will gladly welcome it because it's at least showing more commitment to the stories rather than doing, like, instantaneous booking. You know, where, like, from the very beginning, since they put them together, it's like, you know, their immediate thought was, all right, a month in, break them up, because that was the whole point of this. Whereas, you know, they're showing with RK Bro that even though the plan may still be to break them up, you know, they're pushing it, they're building it, you know. They're actually building that, like, anticipation of, you know, playing with what the fans know, and that is, well, when is Orton finally gonna like snap? When is he gonna do what he usually does with his tag team partners?
Yeah.
And I think they also build it up a lot with their, like, promos and backstage segments where, you know, Orton's consistently, like, ignoring Riddle, Orton's consistently, you know, kind of showing frustration, and you're just left there like, when is Randy gonna snap? But instead of expecting it, they're still continually building, you know, the anticipation and momentum of it, of like, well, if it doesn't happen this week, is it next week? Is it the week after?
And you know what? To somebody's credit, there's something about AJ Styles and Omos that, like, it's still working. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like AJ does, like the wrestling, he does a lot of the character work,
Yeah.
He's just so funny and charming. You know what I mean? Bounce like he's acting almost with a cutout of almost. You know what I mean? He does so little, and I don't know. AJ just looks like he's having an incredible time. I feel for people who think he should be involved in the title, like the heavyweight title picture. The guy's been around for so long. He's just doing something he's never done before.
Yeah, and
I want to see Styles in a title picture more prominently. Go look up TNA.
Yeah, and as I'll get into later when discussing later matches, I think pre-draft there could have been an argument that Styles was really really needed in the title scene, but post-draft I think it's almost in a sense that you feel that if Styles was needed in the title scene, it would be on the other brand that he is on. But I'll get into that later. But the next match is the Queen's Crown Finals between Doudrop and Zelina Vega.
Jack, were either of these your pick for Queen of the Ring or Queen's Crown?
Not at all.
Who would you pick?
I mean, I thought since the beginning, much like a lot of fans, it seemed like the obvious pick was going to be either Liv Morgan or Shayna Baszler.
Whoa. Yeah, Shayna doesn't need it, but she could have used it. But I think Liv needed it, and I was definitely rooting for Liv.
Yeah, and the booking for this tournament was just really odd because Liv went out first round, and they've been kind of building Baszler back up, with the whole thing of her injuring people and taking them out,
Mm-hmm.
And then they just had this really awkward moment where Liv went out first round, Toni Storm went out first round. You had heel versus heel and Vega and Carmella, and Vega making it to the finals. And since she was the heel, it was almost like, typical like WWE. They don't really do a lot of face versus face, heel versus heels.
Right.
So you were like, well, on the other side of the bracket, there's Shayna beat Dana and Piper beat or I forgot who Doudrop beat, but when she made it, I still was like thinking they might go with Shayna and start making Zelina play more of a baby face role in the finals. But the more I thought about it, I was like, Shayna's going to SmackDown. She's more than likely gonna have plans for her there, so I don't think she's going to go that far. And, Doudrop's a face. They're going to get their face versus heel mashup without having to change anyone. So I was like, it was at that kind of point where I kind of started to piece things together and realize this was going to be the finals. But initially, I would not have guessed this would have been the finals. And I'm
not going to lie, for all that you shared that I agree with, and we'll say this later at the other tournament final, but I was pleasantly surprised that we came with Doudrop versus Zelina Vega. One of these women, unless Shane McMahon rolls up and introduces himself in the match and wins the whole thing, one of these women is going to be named the Queens of the Ring for the first time in this company's history. And it's going to belong to either Piper Niven's newest character, Doudrop, or Zelina Vega, who came back after, some hairy business. You know what I mean? It's kind of nice for either of these women.
Yeah, they're new, so props to them for building up. Props to them for building up new women in their division because we both kind of showed they really need it.
This isn't Charlotte versus somebody, Rhea. This is exciting.
Yeah, and they were building it up as well. Saying hey, the first winner of the King of the Ring was Don Morocco. Who will be that illustrious first name for the Queen's Crown. And both women went out. They had a decent match. They definitely got more time than the rest of the tournament matches got, and I don't know. I don't know how much the men's King of the Ring tournament got, but it was kind of weird how little time they got for this tournament. But also at the same time, I understood it because of the fact that there wasn't even that much time between the start of the tournament and the finals that were going to take place at Crown Jewel. So it was like they didn't have to rush the matches, but like they just kind of had to rush out, like, you know, getting all the matches done before Crown Jewel.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, they were on a tight, like, calendar schedule.
Yeah. And, you know, throughout the match, they continued to play up, you know, the size difference between both women, and, you know, Vega essentially fighting from underneath despite being a heel. And,
you know, yeah, I'm just looking at Bleacher Report's analysis as I talk to you, and they sort of comment how, you know, it's weird that Doudrop is having these competitive matches with smaller opponents, and that they're sort of eagerly waiting for when she just starts tearing house down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, you know, the one, like, story aspect was, you know, throughout this match was, you know, obviously not only the size difference, but, you know, it tied into Vega's finisher. You know, she uses that code red, which is essentially closer to, like, a sunset flip, you know, and it's like, well, how do you expect her to hit a move like that on, you know, Doudrop, you know? And they played it up a lot where there was, like, multiple attempts at it until finally the finish of the match is Vega finally hits it and scores the victory.
Nice. Congratulations, Queen Vega.
Yeah, and so it makes sense to me because, like, if you really think about it throughout history and stuff, it's like, much like how the Money in the Bank almost in a sense fits like those sniveling heel type roles, like the cowardly heels. Essentially, King of the Ring, for the most part, was always fitted with, like, you know, arrogant heels and, you know, like these super ego type heels, you know.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna make you eat those words in about 2 matches, but I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, that's the funny thing I'm saying is, but, like, as we'll see 2 matches later, they went the totally opposite route. But, you know, props to them, and props to them for finally, you know, adding another, like, first in terms of, like, you know, women getting similar treatment to the men, you know. There was the first,
Absolutely.
You know, you add it to the record books now, you know. There was the first women's ladder match, first women's Hell in a Cell, first Rumble, first main event of WrestleMania, you know. And now we add this, you know, they finally have the tournament much like the men. I hope they make it a consistent thing, you know, the tournaments for both men and women, that, you know, like sometime around, like, I guess maybe now it's going to be October now, especially because I don't know if you saw, but recently WWE released, like, their current pay-per-view schedule for next year, and, like, there's a couple months that don't have a pay-per-view, so it's almost like they're kind of listening where they're cutting down the amount of pay-per-views they're running. Like,
are they listening, or are they reading the writing on the wall and doing? You know, is it more cost efficient to just not do it?
Yeah, because I think the one thing I emphasize a lot too, especially during Rumble season, was I wish they would just take February and March off in a sense to just build the feuds instead of having those filler pay-per-views. Yeah. And that's what they're doing, because after Rumble, there's no pay-per-view until WrestleMania.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I knew that the schedule came out. I hadn't seen it for myself. But that sounds wild.
And I'll explain it in more detail. I just took a look at my phone. Running out of time in this episode, but that's always usually to be expected. So we'll close out here just to say, you know, thank you for listening to this episode. Got more to cover, including Crown Jewel, and, you know, as we'll get into discussion during the first few minutes, WWE's new pay-per-view schedule. But, you know, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.